Welcome to Newt's World Podcasts on the iHeart Podcast Network. I'm really pleased to welcome my guest, Chris Fenton. For 14 years, Chris served as president of DMG Entertainment, a multi-billion-dollar global media company headquartered in both Beijing and Los Angeles, where he pioneered co-productions between Chinese and American firms. In 2020, he authored Feeding the Dragon, Inside the Trillion-Dollar Dilemma Facing Hollywood, the NBA, and American Business. Both during and after his time at DMG, Fenton produced 25 films grossing more than $2 billion worldwide, and he later led Media Capital Technologies, raising a 9-figure content fund that now co-finances all of Lionsgate's movies. He's a John H. Mitchell Professor at the University of Southern California, an informal advisor to Congress's Select Committee on China, and a contributor to Real Clear Politics, the South China Morning Post, and CNN. He's joining me to talk about his viral Real Clear Politics op-ed on Hollywood's retreat from America, his new film, Bad Counselors, produced entirely with American cast, crew, and financing, and an effort he's part of to bring a national film production incentive to Congress. Chris, welcome, and thank you for joining me again on Newt's World.
Mr. Speaker, it's actually humbling to hear you say all that stuff, knowing how accomplished you are yourself. So one of these days, I'm going to recite your biography.
Okay. I don't want to bore our audience, but I appreciate the thought. You know, your op-ed opens with a pretty striking line that for years you helped Hollywood chase the world, and now you regret it. What were you actually doing in those rooms, and what did you believe you were building at the time?
Wow, that's a great question. Yeah, the last time I was on your show, it was in regards to a book that you mentioned earlier, which chronicled 2 decades of working between the U.S. and China in the entertainment space. And one of the things that guided that mission was the idea of opening a market to our products and services, no matter what was needed to do so. We were under this bit of a misguided directive dating back to, say, 1971 with Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon, and this idea that the more we open the China market to our products and services, the more GDP growth we'd get here, the more jobs we'd create, and most importantly, the more aspirational qualities of democracy we'd spread inside that communist country. So a lot of the things that we did in terms of the entertainment business was really to placate Beijing in order to get access to that market. And that involved everything from moving offshore production in order to help spur their own domestic industry and teach them best in practices, expertise, and talent. And then on top of it, really constructing narratives and messaging inside the movies and the televisions we made to foster and build a Beijing narrative that they wanted carried throughout the world.
How much of that, by the way, was negative in that something which bothered the Chinese, they were adamant about taking out, and how much of it was really an effort to have a pro-Chinese convincing us somehow that they were good guys?
Well, I think it goes towards actual after product made censorship and then premeditated censorship going into the content. So in the aftermarket per se, that was when we would make a movie, not really thinking too much about any particular market, just trying to make that kind of film that would work around the world. And then China would say, hey, this movie has a scene where we don't like it because there's dirty clothes hanging from hangers inside Shanghai, and we don't want to show that kind of a thing. Or there's a criminal getting away from a policeman inside, say, Hong Kong. We don't want to show that. So we would edit that. But what was worse and more nefarious was the fact that we were premeditatedly inserting messaging and propaganda into the films in order to please Beijing. And a perfect example of that is a movie I did called Looper, which was with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Bruce Willis, where we actually took the plot where the future of the movie took place, which was in France, and we replaced the future by having the movie take place in China, because that's where the weight of the world was moving in that movie. And it's where all the characters wanted to be someday, because it was the utopian system.
Well, so I mean, it's almost like doing Chinese propaganda films.
It was because of that carrot that they dangled, that huge market that had so much promise. And of course, looking back at it, it was a terrible idea. And quite frankly, we didn't win over them in the democratic system either.
Because of the competition overseas, Chinese and other, Los Angeles has lost more than 40,000 film and TV jobs, about a quarter of its entertainment workforce. And Atlanta's production spending collapsed from $4.4 billion to about $2.3 billion. How did this happen so quickly?
Yeah, and it's not just China. It's a worldwide phenomenon where we definitely have taught best in practice production expertise to markets around the world. We also, in the search for P&Ls and the way to actually monetize properly and keep costs contained, we've been looking for markets to offshore production. And the reality of it now is that 60% of the production that we do in film and television is done outside of the United States of America. Just in LA alone, we're down 50% just from 2015. And keep in mind that this offshoring started back in the mid-90s. And when you look at sound stages, for instance, in Los Angeles or even Georgia's hub, which has massive facilities, is now running about 75% underutilized or empty at the moment. And in LA, we're about 50% occupancy. So these are really troubled times for a lot of these facilities, and we're seeing a lot of them go bankrupt.
Is this just an expansion of a pattern that was growing, or is this something different?
Yeah, it really truly started when Canada saw an opportunity back in the mid-90s to take advantage of a weakened currency and the fact that their proximity to the U.S. was so close, and there was a lot of interesting exchange of skill sets going on. It's then spread around the world in the 2000s, where a lot of the big hubs are, say, in Australia, South Africa, Eastern Europe, and in particular the UK. And what happened during that time, too, is that nations started to see what a thriving industry this was and how much economic growth actually was spurred every time one of these huge movies was moved into a market or a television series. So if you look at, say, the nations right now that are fighting for all this production activity, there's over 80 of them with federal or national incentives, and we don't have one here in the United States.
You're really talking about a big economic disadvantage in where you would put your money to make the next movie.
100%. Yeah. You have certain provinces, say in Canada, that have almost 50% tax rebates on every qualified spend that you do in that particular market. And on top of it, you have a weakened currency. And then in places like the UK, where say the currency is stronger than US dollar, we have huge opportunities economically to make the costs work because of their socialized or their health care, which is heavily subsidized by the government, which is a huge weight on the studios when you make movies here in the United States. So you combine a lot of these different economic effects and benefits of other markets on top of currency issues and on top of national subsidies and incentives. It makes it very difficult to compete here in the U.S. to keep the production.
When we come back, we'll talk about how Chris put that philosophy into action, producing Bad Counselors, a film made with an American cast and crew and shot entirely on American soil. Bad Counselors follows two frat brothers who get slapped with 120 hours of community service and pose as counselors at a Christian youth camp to avoid expulsion. Why did you pick this particular story as the one you wanted to bet the house on?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, number one is I'm talking to you from one of the studios here at Family Radio, which is one of the largest Christian broadcast networks in the country. And they help finance Loam Entertainment, which is the company that made this movie and financed it. One of the directives that they have is simply to make content that calls the audience to do something greater with themselves and for the world. Not necessarily faith-based, but just a call for something greater. And what we saw in this particular movie is that there was an opportunity to make a PG-13 family comedy, something that works for both parents and kids, that was safe to bring kids as young as 8 to go see, something that you don't see a lot of out of Hollywood nowadays. On top of it, there's no political ideologies, no slant to the left or the right or whatever. It's just good, clean fun. And we saw a really interesting redemption story taking place with two funny characters from a fraternity house that actually had to redeem themselves in the face of the college. And one of the ways they do it is they actually have to go serve as counselors at a Christian camp, not being Christians. They have to fake their way through it. So, of course, you see a lot of antics ensue, and then you have them sort of redeem themselves and find out, wow, this is an interesting sort of path. Faith might be something I'm interested in, and it brings their curiosity about. And it's just a lot of fun, too.
I think what you're doing is terrific. And this is a new movie. It is coming out. And maybe we could give our listeners a little taste of the movie.
Yeah, fantastic. Roll that trailer. We love it. It's been watched 15 million times already.
Officer Montgomery.
Your fraternity is still on probation. You're not throwing a party tonight, are you?
Party? Oh.
So close to me, Booty, we can almost taste it.
Oh. We are Beta, Alpha, Delta. To a night we'll never forget.
Yeah. In a night we won't remember, boys.
Public intoxication, destruction of school property, disturbing the peace.
Rather than allowing this mistake to ruin our lives, let's make good out of it.
So, community service.
Dude, how are we going to get 120 hours in 2 weeks?
Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. Aren't you an answer to my prayers?
I am.
We're looking for more male counselors for Camp Burning Bush.
Tyler, in order to make this work, we really got to do our homework.
If your Bible's falling apart, chances are your life ain't.
Come on. So good.
Peace be with you, Father.
You can just call me Tom. Can you tell me a little bit about your walk?
My walk is fast.
Nah, his walk is steady.
Steady.
We ain't taking no.
Let's get the rest of these bags on the bus, and then it is all aboard. Chirp, chirp.
Is the seat taken?
Actually, we're supposed to sit with one of the campers. Let me see if I can find your guy. Oh, there he is.
Would you rather smell like a foot or look like a foot?
Is everyone excited for camp?
Whose idea was it to come to this stupid camp?
Oh, no.
I hate kids.
We're not supposed to be on our phone.
I keep that little 10-year-old mouth shut.
I'm 12.
Then let's start acting like it, yeah? I hate camping, and we're not Christians.
Our Father, who does art in heaven, hello be your name.
We ain't taking no.
I'm on to you. We've got to come clean.
You say something, we get kicked out. That's great, bud. Is that you and your dad?
It's you and me.
Who are you, Grayson?
I think I'm still trying to figure that out.
It's time for a counselor makeover. On. So good. So good.
Tyler! Hey, Shadow, have you seen Tyler? Nope, sorry. Okay. Tyler!
Good stuff.
You shot this in North Carolina, Tennessee, and California, and you got an American studio, Loam Entertainment, to fund it. You produced it with American companies, Loam, Zero Gravity, and Narrowgate. So from the very beginning, you were willing to pay a premium in cost. What was the actual cost of that decision? And when you look at it now, was it worth it?
Yeah, that's another interesting question. I mean, we shot in a right-to-work state, which was North Carolina, and then we did a lot of additional work in other states that are really conducive to movie production, like Texas and Tennessee. So we found really interesting benefit in terms of particular states across the country. But then on top of it, we did see a cost that was roughly, say, 10% more than if we did it somewhere else, right? It's a summer camp movie, so you could really shoot it in Canada, you could shoot it in the UK, you could shoot it anywhere in the world. But that extra 10% cost that could easily be offset by, say, some sort of national subsidy here in the US was worth it to us because we believed we could create a template where you could make a movie with 1,200 Americans from creative all the way through crew and then market that movie as something that's fully American made and get that benefit that, say, Harley Davidson gets when people go, hey, that must be a really nicely crafted, well done, high quality film. I want to go see it. And our hope is that offsets the extra 10% that it costs to make it here in the US. And if it works, hopefully we create a template for many others to do the same.
You also make the point that when you make an investment, say in North Carolina or Tennessee, you actually leave behind a permanent improvement in the talent and the capabilities. So it's not just a one-time jolt, but it's a step towards a more competitive and more creative system.
Yeah, that's 100% true. In fact, there's been a lot of a learning curve over the years by states in every industry to figure out how to benefit taxpayers and the people of those states while also drawing certain industries and productions into the state. When you shoot in North Carolina, in fact, we shot that movie a year ago and we're still going through the audit process in order to get our tax rebate. And the reason they do that is they want to make sure that everybody that we said we hired in that state is a North Carolina citizen. So it has to benefit the state. It has to benefit people there that are there permanently working in this industry. And you have to be able to prove it every way that they ask. And that's an important facet. And in terms of American film production incentive, the same type of federal program would require the same. So this is not about building facilities from scratch because we already have the best in the world facilities here in the U.S. And it's not about training people and spending all that money to train people because we do have the best craftsmen in the world here in the U.S. So it's simply about what are you spending on our citizens? And that's where you get that extra reward.
I want to ask you about one of the bigger business deals underway in terms of Hollywood, and that's the Paramount Skydance effort to buy Warner Brothers and the degree to which that's led to really some strong pushback that might cost jobs. What's your take and what's your sense of whether or not that's a good thing to have happen?
Well, my take is obviously I want as many opportunities and jobs for Americans as possible. And any consolidation obviously threatens something like that. So this consolidation is occurring. It is going to create some disruption to the downside in terms of opportunities and jobs in Hollywood. But the important thing to note is that it is needed. And we have Warner Brothers, which has piled on a lot of debt over time, and it's not a healthy studio. And David Ellison and Paramount have come in to try to help bring that studio back to life. It was a bidding war between them and Netflix. The party that won was David Ellison, and David is a huge proponent of the theatrical movie experience, which is very good for exhibitors around the country and around the world. Netflix obviously is a juggernaut, but it was questionable whether Netflix really had a priority agenda in terms of theatrical experience. So out of the two, I think the best version of this has occurred. The consolidation needs to happen because there is an unhealthy studio there. So David wants to bring it back to life. And one of the issues that's going on now is that we do have a political uproar about this consolidation that's trying to hold up and impede the merger acquisition. And I'm okay with that if there's actually a solution to it that will work. The problem is it's just blocking and creating obstacles to block and create obstacles for political favor without any sort of solutions or alternatives provided. So I think people need to relax and realize this is the best version of what needs to get done, unfortunately, in a very disrupted environment. And we got to believe that David is going to protect something he's been super passionate about his whole life and his whole career, which is movie making and putting movies on the big screen.
Coming up, Chris is part of a coalition of Hollywood unions and guilds pushing Congress for a national production incentive to keep films like this one in America. We'll get into how it would actually work. You're part of a coalition, the Directors Guild, IATSE, SAG-AFTRA, the Teamsters, the Producers Guild, and others, pushing for what you call the American Federal Production Incentive. In plain terms, what would it actually do?
Well, in plain terms, it's essentially a call for bringing this federal idea together that would layer an extra 10% on top of what the states are already doing, because that's literally all that's needed to level the playing field and to keep production here in the U.S. Importantly, too, is that being here in Tennessee right now, I realize California, Los Angeles, no one really cares too much about what's going on in those states from these other states across the heartland. In fact, yes, we are the United States, but the idea of something that just helps California is pretty intolerable for a lot of people. So the important thing that I'm out doing, as well as the coalition, is talking about these production hubs that are throughout the country. And in fact, a lot of them are in swing states that are very important coming up to the midterms. So we're really trying to make sure President Donald Trump is aware of this issue and is realizing that he has an opportunity to be on the 250th birthday of this nation, a part of rebirthing USA filmmaking, because this is about states like Georgia, which is one of the largest production hubs in the country, to Louisiana, North Carolina, South Carolina, Nevada, New Mexico, Texas, you name it. This is not a California issue, and it's something that benefits 2.7 million Americans and over $250 billion in wages.
You've also pointed out that there are over 80 countries that already offer some kind of national tax incentive to attract film and TV production. That creates a pretty substantial incentive to leave the U.S., doesn't it?
It's a huge incentive, and unfortunately, it's why 60% of our production is done outside of the United States of America. And by the way, California experienced the same with how difficult it is to make movies and television there. 80% of the production of film and television is actually done outside of California's borders, which is a pretty unbelievable number when most people think Hollywood is the hub of all of this.
You point out that film and TV productions already now work with over 122,000 businesses in all 50 states, and that more than 90% of those businesses employ 10 or fewer people, local catering, lodging, equipment rental. So this is really, in some ways, a very big small business incentive with a kind of a cascading effect from the actual production out to all the different people who get hired to do it.
Yeah, it's an incredible sort of ecosystem when you think about it. No one really looks at film and television as this massive industry, say like automotive or whatever. So you are employing a lot of people when you make even a single movie. And this movie that I'm involved with, Bad Counselors, which your audience can go to badcounselors.com and find a theater near them to go see it. But this movie is independently financed film from Loam Entertainment, so it's smaller than your average studio film, but we still employed 1,200 Americans to make this film. When I made Iron Man 3, when I was a part of that village that made that massive blockbuster, we had over 8,500 people working on that film, and unfortunately not all of them were American.
That leads to something different, though, which is that if you think of the global market, not just China or India or whatever, there are a whole genre of movies that lend themselves to being worldwide blockbusters on a scale that, for my generation, would have seemed unimaginable. But it's now become sort of normal. Is there a particular formula that leads to those kind of blockbusters?
Well, if I knew the formula, I'd probably be living on a private island somewhere right now or sailing around in a big yacht. But the formula is one that a lot of people think they've cracked over the years, but no one ever has. In fact, the best movie pickers out there probably bat 500. That's about it. So the formula I think is always worth trying to achieve is just finding great stories that are relevant to as many people as possible. And that's one thing that Hollywood has had a hard time doing, which is sometimes they make movies just for what they think the Hollywood community wants, but they forget about the rest of the world and definitely the rest of the country. So it's about good stories, really compelling characters, and something that speaks to the individual member of the audience in a way that makes it really relevant to their life and something that allows them to escape and get engaged in a story where they feel a part of for the next 2 hours.
You make a couple of really interesting points. For example, I didn't realize this number, but that U.S. film and television production exports lead to a more than $10 billion trade surplus every year, which tells us there's a pretty big international demand for American film and television. I mean, that's a very significant addition to our balance of trade, isn't it?
It really is. And in fact, when I was working so closely with China, we used to joke that there were three main exports that China wanted of ours: real estate here in the United States of America, our university education system, and our entertainment. Those were the big ones. And quite frankly, entertainment has been a huge export plus for us here in the U.S. Our stories have been very relevant universally around the world, although it is getting more difficult. We actually spent a lot of time in order to sell fish to certain markets. We taught them how to fish themselves. So there's a lot of markets now that are making very relevant content just for their market alone, which is hurt our ability to make and maximize as much income as possible from those markets. And for instance, China, which we were so aggressively trying to placate Beijing with in order to get our product in there, we taught them so well that our market share of that market, which was well over 60% for most of my career, is now down around 5% today. So we have lost a lot of that golden goose that was that market there.
And hasn't Bollywood always been very, very competitive in India?
Yeah, India is a tough nut to crack. India has various different, very diverse population there. It's very hard to find something that's relevant for the whole population. It tends to work with different sects of it. And Bollywood has really been the predominant force in that market. And America has never really had a good opportunity to crack in there. We've tried. We definitely tried.
I just thought that even more than the rise in Hong Kong and in China, that the rise of Bollywood was a totally separate thing.
Yeah, it's a huge economic driver for that country. Their domestic Bollywood business is massive, and it actually exports really well in that region. For instance, the Gulf states love Bollywood content. In fact, a lot of that Bollywood content is made in various other areas of that region, too.
If Congress, in fact, follows your advice and does, in fact, pass a federal production incentive, 10 years from now, what do you think the next Bad Counselors looks like, and what do you think the American movie industry looks like?
Well, there's a couple things. Number one is if we can get President Trump and Congress to both get behind this. And in fact, on the congressional side, Brian Jack from Georgia and Laura Friedman from California already have strong coalitions to make a bipartisan push through. We really need the executive branch to get behind it in order to get this done. But if you're talking about the future after this 10% is put through and we do have this federal subsidy, I would predict 60% of that offshoring of production is probably going to drop to say 30%. We'll always have certain movies and television shot around the world simply because of the plot that's involved or the various other geographic scenarios or whatever is needed to make that particular content relevant for the plot and the story. But we'll definitely make a huge dent in what we've done that was very, very wrong for a large amount of people that work in the industry. On top of it, one of the very important points is that the soft power influence of this product that we put out from our Hollywood apparatus will get that much stronger, because when you have a full American crew, a full American creative process, you're able to have a much stronger soft power, subtle influence in terms of what you're making as far as content's concerned. And quite frankly, I'd like to see a lot more pro-American content actually made again, because we've been missing that for quite some time.
I think that's a powerful vision. And I want to thank you for joining me. Your new film, Bad Counselors, is exclusively in theaters nationwide, July 22nd through 27th. I'd encourage everyone listening to go see it, support American-made filmmaking. And Chris, I want to encourage you to continue to fight for a strong American-based motion picture and television production system.
Thank you so much for having me. Always humble, and I'm happy to come back anytime to talk more about this.
Thank you to my guest, Chris Fenton. Newt's World is produced by Gingrich 360 and iHeartMedia. Our executive producer is Garnsey Sloan. Our researcher is Rachel Peterson. Special thanks to the team at Gingrich 360. If you've been enjoying Newt's World, I hope you'll go to Apple Podcasts and both rate us with 5 stars and give us a review so others can learn what it's all about. Join me on Substack at Gingrich360.net. I'm Newt Gingrich. This is Newt's World.